Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to Bracy Sports Media. My name is Aaron Bracy, and I'm thrilled to be joined today by Jon Marks, who can be heard weekdays from 2 to 6 p.m. on Sports Radio 94 WIP on the Marks and Reese Show with his partner, former Eagles linebacker Ike Reese. Jon's show also can be streamed on the radio.com app. Jon, thanks so much for joining us today on Bracy Sports Media.
What is up, man? I'm honored. You've had a hell of a guest list so far, so it's good to get on the show.
Well, you're helping our list, so thanks for joining us. If you're watching this on our YouTube channel, you can also watch this interview, listen to this interview on our podcast, Bracy Sports Media. If you are listening on our podcast, you can watch on our YouTube channel, Bracy Sports Media. And finally, be sure to check out the story that goes with this interview on BracySportsMedia.com. All right, Jon, now that we got this out of the way, let's get right into it. One of the things I really miss about sports is doing prep work. I love doing prep work to cover the games. And so as I was doing my prep work last night, I spent 53 minutes and 38 seconds, well, should I say, watching you and your wife in the closet. Tell us about how that started. What was the idea behind that? And what was the reaction to it? Because I really enjoyed the stories that you guys told.
Yeah, it was probably 53 minutes too long that you watched. But so when all this happened, the pandemic happened, we were actually in Florida with the show. We were at spring training. So while we're at spring training, Major League Baseball says, hey, you can't interview the players. You have to be a certain amount of distance away. So literally like real time, we're down there, and this is when the bleep is starting to hit the fan with the coronavirus. We were worried about going down there as it was. So we were down there. Everything kind of went down. We got back, and I did like one show. And when I was down in Florida, I actually got a really bad sore throat and a cough. I didn't have a fever, but I didn't feel well. So naturally, I remember laying in bed in the hotel being like, oh my God, do I have COVID-19? I didn't. But when I got back to the station and I was sick, they're like, dude, you shouldn't come in. Like at this point with where we are. So I missed 2 days, not because I didn't want to work, because they're like, we don't want you in here. So I missed a Friday and a Monday. And then the Tuesday, I called my boss, Mike Missanelli, again in the morning, and he's like, dude, if you're still having any kind of symptoms, we don't want you to come in. I'm like, dude, I don't want to be off the air. So they brought me a box up to my house, and I was able to set up a studio in my walk-in closet. And that's where I was doing the show for, I don't know, it was 7 weeks, 7 weeks, from the middle of March up until my first week back at WIP in the studios was this week. So I was stuck we have a nice size walk-in closet. And it actually made for good studio space. But getting back to your original question, I was just trying to figure some stuff to do at night to where it was like, all right, well, like, what can I do at night? Can I do a Twitter live? Can I do an Instagram live? I didn't want to talk about what the Eagles were going to do in free agency or what they were going to do in the draft. So I said, you know what? Like, my family and my wife, they're such a big part of me and everything. So I brought her into the closet with me. And we did an hour Instagram live and Twitter live, and we took every question, and we got really good reaction. Like you said, I thought it was really cool. So we're going to do it again.
Yeah, it was awesome. One of the things I learned was your wife isn't really thrilled about your Nick Foles tattoo. Can you tell that story about how that tattoo came about, and then you only let your wife know the day before that you're actually going through with it?
Yeah, so at some point on the air, and this wasn't me saying Nick Foles stinks and they're not going to win. If they win, I'll get a tattoo. It was me saying, I believe the Eagles can win, and if the Eagles win a Super Bowl, I'll even get Nick Foles tattooed on my back. And then they made the playoffs, and then they won a game, and then they won the second game to the Super Bowl. And I remember at halftime of the Super Bowl, the Eagles are leading, and I'm thinking, not, oh my God, the Eagles are going to win a Super Bowl. I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm really going to have to go through with this. And I said it at that point, and my wife's like, you're not really going to do it. And I'm like, yeah, I'm really going to do it. I'm too dumb to realize I should have just not done it or gotten something else on my back that was removable. I don't have any other tattoos. So Eagles win the Super Bowl, and I went through with it. I got a big Nick Foles on my back. It's like a quarter on my back. I didn't share with my wife when I was doing it until the night before, when I'm like, oh, by the way, I'm getting that tattoo tomorrow. She was so mad. A couple months worth of angry wife for the most part, but that's how it all went down. So the only thing I would change is I would have kept her more in the loop as far as what tattoo was going on my back. But the more I kept her in the loop, the more she tried to talk me out of it, or the more she was trying to influence me, which is why I didn't tell her about it. Makes
Well,
sense.
she stuck with you, though.
She did. She did.
Jon Marks from WIP Radio joining us here on Bracy Sports Media. Jon, you started the afternoon show in November of 2017, partnering with Ike Reese, and the show has been a success. In the most recent ratings book, according to published reports, you were first in the all-important male category, 25 to 54 age category, with a 10.9 rating. First of all, congratulations. And a couple questions. First question is, to what do you owe the success of the show, and I guess particularly the chemistry that you and Ike have?
Yeah, I think when I came to WIP and I worked nights for, I guess it was 6, 7, 8 months. And then Chris Carlin, who was working with Ice before, had an opportunity to move to WFAN in New York, and he took that opportunity. And luckily I was right there to slide in. And I had the benefit of walking into the Eagles Super Bowl year. Yeah. So when I started the show full time, it was November 2017 of the Super Bowl year. So it was a pretty good time to slide in.
Not bad.
Yeah. So, and I think from there, it's just, we're honestly, like, I'm just a regular guy. I am, I go to the grocery store twice a week and I cook and I have my kids and I fight with my wife and we have great times and we have tough times, you know what I mean? And pairing with Ike, who is, obviously a former professional athlete, but now I look at him more as a radio host than an athlete. He's been on the radio longer than he actually played football professionally. So I think the combination of me being a local guy that's been here most of my life, or my whole life really, and Ike coming in and being here for the last 20 years, and a guy that just gets it, right? Like a guy that just gets our culture and gets what we do and what we want and how we like our sports. And from there, I think it's doing the show. I mean, I don't really know what's made it successful or as successful as it's been, because we've had a really, really good run. We've won 4 of the last 5 books in first place. So I think it's just more or less going on the air and being us and having fun and being loose and having good energy, and everything else kind of takes care of itself from there.
Well, the two guys that sat in the chair before you were not from Philly, and you're from Philly, grew up here, grew up a Philly sports fan, just like everyone else. How big of a factor do you think that is to being able to connect with Philadelphia fans?
I mean, ultimately, I remember when Josh was working afternoons, I would get the question a lot, and he had some early success. I think it helps, right? Certainly knowing everything that's happened in the course of Philly sports since before I was even born is beneficial. And if you don't know that, coming into the city blind could be intimidating. I listen to some Boston sports radio, and just to think if I was to try to go up there, which by the way I wouldn't, but if let's say I wanted to go to Boston sports radio, I don't know what I would do. Right. You know what I mean? I don't know the city. I don't know the culture really. I don't know the history as well as I know here. So that helps. But I think ultimately when people turn on the radio, they just want to be entertained, right? Whether it's the 35 minutes that you're driving home and you're on 76, or you're going over the Ben Franklin and you're just trying to get home, people are tuning you in because they want to be entertained. And if you're not entertaining, they will turn you off. It doesn't mean they don't like you, but if you're rambling or you're talking about something they don't like, they will turn you off. So I think more than anything, the key to the success is just being entertaining and being yourself. And I think that works. But does it help that I'm from here? Sure. Would it be tough to not be from here and have success? Yeah, maybe a little bit. But I think if you're entertaining, you can have success anywhere.
What's it like behind the scenes working with Ike? What kind of person is he? And I mean, he comes across as just a regular guy on the air. Is that how he is off the air? And have there been challenges to work with him, or has it been pretty seamless?
Well, it's been seamless for sure. And I know when I was coming to WIP that, I didn't know if I was after I left the Fanatic, I didn't know exactly what I was going to do. I didn't know if WIP was going to happen. I didn't know if I was really going to go there. I didn't know who I would work with if I was going to go there. So you're thinking about who could you possibly work with when you go there. And everybody that I had talked to that had worked with him or worked around him had said great things about Ike. Very easy to work with, prepared, just gets it. And I mean, that really describes him to a T. I know this, and I've worked with some former athletes in my time in radio, a number of former athletes. And some of them just think that their job is to come in because they're the former athlete and that's it. Ike doesn't treat it like that. Ike's as prepared as me, my producer, Jack Fritz. He comes in, he knows everything that's happening in the world of sports. He's watched all the shows, which I don't really watch. So I know he's watching. So he's watching the Skip and the Shannons, and he's watching the First Takes. So when he comes in, and we come in every day about 1:45 to meet and finalize everything that's going on, he's as prepared as anybody that I've ever worked with, if not more. And that's really all you need. And then from there, he's a big sports fan, right? So he's not faking it. He's not coming in pretending he watched the games. No, he's a bigger sports fan than me. He's watching NBA games. The 10:30 starts to where I'm dead asleep. So somebody that just gets it, and I mean that's Ike, and he's been really easy to work with. He's fun, and it's been great working with him. It really has.
Jon Marks from WIP. You can hear him weekdays on 2 to 6 on Sports Radio 94 WIP. Jon, let's talk about your competition, because not only are you competing against other radio stations, but in today's environment, with what I'm doing here, trying to do, you have podcasts and the like, and different people talking. I read a quote in an interview you did a while ago where you said, in radio, you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Is that kind of how you approach every day as far as the competition is concerned?
Well, I mean, I think when your audience, anybody can talk about Carson Wentz whether they like him or not, and we know that people are tuning in for sports. I mean, they're not tuning in to hear politics. They're not tuning in to hear. They're tuning in to hear sports, but they're also tuning in to hear about us, to hear about our lives, right? Like, we're the people that talk on the air for 4 hours a day. So is it comfortable necessarily talking about personal things with my family and with my wife? I mean, not all the time, and she gets mad at a lot of it. And it's something that I have to balance, knowing like, hey, is she listening right now? Is this something that people are going to text her that I'm talking about? But those uncomfortable moments, I think people relate to. And whether it's you're having an argument with your wife or what it's about, I mean, we all have it. You have it, I have it, we all have it. And I've
still never won one of those, by the way.
No, I haven't either. I mean, it's just last night we were going at it, but like, that's life, And I think everybody kind of appreciates that. And Ike's kind of the same way, to where we're really like, we're family men. We love our wife, we love our kids. And like, that's pretty much our life right now. But yeah, I've always so I grew up I listened to WIP, but my radio love was Howard Stern.
Right.
And Howard Stern, during his day before he went to Sirius, talk about some uncomfortable topics and just kind of towing that line, especially on terrestrial radio.
Right.
So that's kind of like, I never thought I'd be doing sports radio, to be perfectly honest with you. I always wanted to do radio. I always wanted to be involved in talk radio, but and I love sports, but I never, when I was growing up, envisioned myself doing sports radio.
Well, I want to talk a little bit more about your competition. I want to go back to what you were just mentioning, but your biggest competitor on the radio in Philadelphia is Mike Missanelli, and you worked as his producer, I think, for 4 years. I'm sure he did a ton for your career to help you. Also, a couple of years ago, I think there was some bad blood, perhaps, or maybe you perhaps got upset when there were some accusations of a burner Twitter account, and and now he's your number one competitor, and you're the guy you're trying to beat every day. So I'm just wondering, how do you feel about Mike Missanelli?
Yeah, I mean, he a couple of years ago had some things to say that honestly were, I mean, they hurt. They hurt. They were false, and they hurt, and they were unnecessary. And I thought our relationship was good. Despite us going head to head, I thought everything was fine. I worked with Mike for 4 years. When he first came to what was then 9:50 a.m., I was his producer, and I was his second mic, and it was my the biggest break in my career. I was working at a station that no one had really heard about, no one listened to, and through some networking and a little bit of luck, I got to work with them, and it was, I don't know where I am right now if I didn't get to work on that show. But more importantly, it was a really, really good show, and I'm very proud of what we accomplished in our 4 years. We went from being a station with a terrible signal that no one listened to being the top rated show in the market on a bad AM signal, which also led to them flipping to FM, the FM side of the dial. So, I'm not going to sit here and say bad things about Mike because that it's not worth it for me. He will always mean a lot to me as far as my radio career. And I'll just leave it at that. And by the way, he's got a good show. I was always a big fan of Mike. My favorite radio show was Steve and Mike, Steve Fredericks and Mike Missanelli. So when I was in high school, that was the show that I listened to, and I loved that show. They were a great balance. I love Steve-O. So I was always a Mike fan, and when I got a chance to work with him, it was not always easy at times, but what is easy at times?
Jon Marks from WIP Radio joining us here on Bracy Sports Media. All right, Jon, I want to go back to your kind of career and actually pre-radio career, and I see you started out at Hawaii Pacific. Where did that come? So kind of a life event happened in 2002. I got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and up until that point, and I'm in my mid-20s, up until that point I was working this job, working that job, working in restaurants, working office jobs, living in the city, kind of going paycheck to paycheck, not really knowing what I was doing, right? I always thought like, oh, I'll go back to college, I'll go back to school. And it wasn't until I got sick and I got diabetic with no health insurance, really with just a part-time job, it was the real kick in the ass I needed. And I always had wanted to move somewhere other than Pennsylvania to go to college. And I said, okay, I'm either going to go to California or Hawaii. And I ended up choosing going to Hawaii Pacific University. And I was there for 2 calendar years. And it was a great college. I had so much fun. I wish I could have stayed. But when I got to a point where I needed to start doing internships and I wanted to be in radio and I'm applying for internships, it became pretty clear that I would have been starting my career with one foot in the ground, just with the pace of life out there, with the pace of business out there. So I decided, let me go home, let me go to Temple, let me finish there, and let me try to get my radio career going. So that's what I did. Well, it's a great story. So you went to Temple, and then you got an internship at WPEN, which, as you said, was just starting. I remember I was covering TV and radio at the time for the Courier Post, and I remember the station starting. But it was just, as a listener, it was just kind of a ragtag. The sound wasn't great. It was just kind of, it was started from scratch. Tell us the story of how you got started there, and then what do you remember most about those early days working there?
That was awesome. And I think the early days, if it would have been a real station, I would have been fired because I wasn't very good starting out. But I mean, I guess I was 28, 29. So I was even coming in older than a few of the employees. There's only a couple employees, and there was only one local show, it was Jody McDonald. And then they added shows as a little bit of time went on. But so I came in as an intern, and I was more or less just like, all right, like, when do you need me? So I was just there all the time. They couldn't get rid of me. I was in school, and I was there before school, and I was there after school. And as they added shows, they added a morning show, they added a nighttime show. I was just always there working for free, which they liked a lot. So it didn't take long for them to hire me, because even when they hired me and I was getting paid 10 or 15 hours a week, I was still there 40 hours a week. And I already had skills from being in school, digital audio and things like that, to where I was kind of more qualified than most of the people there with some of my technical skills. So they hired me. And at the time, so their lineup was the Fox Sports Radio national show in the morning.
Right.
Which led into Tony Bruno live from Los Angeles on Sporting News Network from 9 to 1. This is 2006.
Yeah.
And then from there, you had Jim Rome from 12 to 3. And then finally, Jody came local at 3 o'clock.
Right.
So Jody was 3 to 7, and then they had a nighttime show for a little while. But I think my first real job there was doing the sports updates during the Jim Rome show. Gotcha. So for like a year, whenever Rome went to commercial, I would sit there and babysit the board. And then when it would be time for me to do an update, I would do a bad 90-second update. Like I said, I wasn't very good in the beginning. And then it would just go back to Jim Rome. So you're right, at the time, and now that I've been doing radio for as long as I have, like, the expectations for that station, you're starting out, you have one local show, like, that you're not going to compete with WIP or anybody else. You're just trying to get off the ground. So in the beginning, I don't think anybody thought we would be there. I don't think anybody thought it would actually last. Right? We used to make jokes that it was going to be, it was going to be ESPN Deportes 950 by the time we were done with it. But listen, the station lasted, and we were able to kind of make it to where we held on just long enough to where then Mike Missanelli became available, and they hired him, and that really changed everything.
It's a great story of perseverance and hard work, and a great lesson for people. You got your foot in the door, you were willing to work for free, and you made a career out of it. Ultimately, you ended up leaving the Fanatic and coming to WIP in 2017 and working nights. What do you remember about that, and why did you leave? And how did you feel about coming to WIP?
Well, my wife obviously was skeptical, and I'm not going to say against it, but when you're going from making a pretty good living to like, hey, I'm going to quit, and there's a lot of uncertainty, to where I was sure that WIP would want me, but I wasn't sure to the capacity, right? Like, I was working with Anthony on the morning show, and while it wasn't my show, it wasn't Anthony Gargano and Jon Marks, it was still to where I'd been with the company for a long time. I was doing well, and I was valued. The company valued me. But it also was the case where it's like, okay, well, where am I going from here, right? Like, what exactly am I doing? Am I just kind of being the sidekick to Anthony? Am I going to then move back to another day part? Mike was in the afternoon. Was I going to try to do middays again, like I had done middays before? I just felt like it was time to move on. And it was tough because I knew everybody from all the stations. That it then was owned by Greater Media. It's since been sold to a different company, but it was tough. But I knew that it was what I needed to do, because the way I looked at it was that I would rather not work in radio than kind of settle for what I was doing at the time, which wasn't really what I wanted to do. So how it went down was I remember telling my boss, they were trying to extend my contract by a year before they had sold it to a new company. They were actually trying to hook me up because they didn't know what the new company was going to do. And I finally just told them, I'm like, listen, I'm not going to renew my contract when it's up. And they're like, what? I'm like, yeah, I'm not renewing my contract. So I was on the air a couple more weeks, and then they finally were like, all right, well, we can't leave you on the air anymore. We're going to let you go now. And then a couple months later, I started working at WIP. And let me say this. I knew that I would be kind of betting on myself, because I took roughly 40% less money to leave to go to WIP. It was kind of like, if you're looking at it from a sports standpoint, it's like that guy that does a prove it 1 year deal and says, hey, listen, give me a 1 year deal. I'm going to prove it, and then I'm going to show my worth. And that's kind of how I looked at it. I didn't know that when I was leaving the station, but I knew that there was a chance that, like, listen, and that's kind of where my wife was like, we don't even know what we're doing. Right? Like, we don't even know if we're going to be able to pay our mortgage, but it's worked out so far.
Wow, I didn't realize that. Leap of faith. What a great decision you made. Jon Marks from WIP Radio joining us here on Bracy Sports Media. All right, Jon, a couple more things I wanted to cover with you. One of which is doing sports radio every day. You have to have an opinion. You have to, you can't be lacking energy. You can't be lacking opinions. What are the challenges of doing your job every day? What do you like about it? And what do you find the most challenging, maybe, would you say?
Well, the one thing that I like about doing talk radio, live talk radio, is that you can think when you wake up in the morning that, all right, what are we going to talk about today? You figure out what we're going to talk about, and then you talk about it. There's a lot of days where stuff happens, right, and changes things. And then there's other days where there's breaking news. So the breaking news aspect, especially working afternoons, when you work mornings, not a lot of things break, right? You used to get news overnight when the papers would write something for the morning edition, but that doesn't really happen anymore. So you get a lot of breaking news in the mid mornings and the afternoons. So I would say the favorite part of my job is the breaking news aspect of it, to where on days of free agency with Bryce Harper, that was one of the funnest times of me being on the air. Yeah. Like, every day it was like, he loves me not, he loves me not.
I remember listening to you at the time, and you were like, forget it. You loved them, and then you're like, forget about it.
Depended on the day and the report, right? Like John Heyman said that he liked the Giants. I hated him. He's drinking us, right? But it ended up working out. So I love the aspect of that. You never know what's going to happen,
right?
And to me, that's what's fun about doing radio. I think the challenging thing would be, and like a lot of people ask me right now during the pandemic, like, man, it must be really tough not doing radio with games. Like, yeah, sure. I mean, you don't have games to react to, but you know what it's like in Philly doing sports radio. We're talking about the draft, leading up to the draft, then we're reacting to the draft. We're talking about free agency. That's always the main entree. That's always the main course. It seems to be the Eagles, and then the Phillies can take over a little bit in the summer or whatever. But I think the main thing from somebody that does it 5 days a week is just realizing what your audience wants to hear. Right? Like, it'd be very easy on a day where it's like, man, we just talked about the Eagles draft for 3 straight days. I don't feel like doing that today. Let's just like fool around. Let's not talk about anything. Well, like I always say this, the Action News, right? I grew up listening to Action News. Most of the people in our area did, right? They always start off their broadcast saying, and the big story on Action News. Jim Gardner never says, well, there's not really going on anything on today, so let's send it to Dave Roberts for weather, right? You can't do that.
Right.
So there always has to be something happening, and if that means that you got to rev it up a little bit, then you got to rev it up a little bit.
Jon Marks from WIP Radio joining us here on Bracy Sports Media. All right, John, last question. When you look back at your career thus far, what stands out to you the most? What's most memorable about what you've been able to do?
Well, I'll tell a story. I was the morning show producer of Michael Bradley and Glenn Foley. Glenn Foley, the pride of
I remember listening.
And Boston College and the New York Jets. And I was very unhappy because the station was like, wasn't doing anything. The show wasn't going anywhere. And I actually thought the show was pretty good, but it just, like, you could just see something wasn't happening. And I was just like fiending for more, and I was fiending for more. And I got an opportunity through somebody else that I'd worked with that was at another station. He got a job, tryout essentially, at a station in Atlanta. Okay. An alternate, it was called Project 961. It was like in Philly, they have 104.5 alternate music. It was that station, but it was in Atlanta. And he got a tryout for a morning show job, and he took me with him. So we did 2 overnight shifts on the weekends. So they flew us down there. We did 2 shows. I thought we were really good. I thought for sure we had it. He got the job. I didn't. The problem was the program director already had a second mic with Brian in mind, so he didn't want me. But I was set on that job, moving to Atlanta. I liked the city. I liked the area where the station was. I was single. It was just like, it just made so much sense. And then I didn't get it. So it was right around that moment when I came back up to where things started cooking with Mike Missanelli maybe coming to the station.
Right.
So I always wonder what would have happened with my radio career if I would have gotten that job, because I would have definitely left WPEN, and I would have definitely went down there. And the guy that I went down with, he lasted 3 years. He lasted his contract. They didn't renew him, and he's selling real estate. He's been out of radio since then. So I always wonder what would have been. What would have been if I didn't take that? Would I still be in radio? Yeah, I think I'd still be in radio, but I could be living anywhere else than here. But it's weird to think what one thing like that just totally changes your life to where I wouldn't have met my wife. I wouldn't have my kids. So that's kind of how I look at my career, that I've been very, very lucky to be able to stay here in Philly and kind of fulfill my dreams of being in the radio in my hometown.
Well, John, for listeners like myself and the listeners who are making you number one in your time slot, we're certainly glad that that Atlanta job did not work out for you. So I'm glad that you made it here, and we love listening to you every day. You can listen to Jon Marks and Ike Reese from 2 to 6 p.m. weekdays on 94 WIP. And also on the radio.com app. John, thanks so much for joining us here today on Bracy Sports Media.
And you're doing a great job. And I've been tuning in. You've been getting some great guests. You've been hustling and getting some really good sound bites. So have me on again, but I'll be watching, man. And I'm proud of you. Great job.
Appreciate it. If you like our interviews, you can download our podcast wherever you get your podcast at Bracy Sports Media. And if you like our YouTube interviews, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, Bracy Sports Media, and hit the notifications button. Thanks for listening. Have a great day, everyone.